All right, welcome to another interview edition of the Mama Says Namaste podcast. Today I have Michael Arterberry with me, and we are Michael reached out to me about being on the podcast, and of course I don't always do interviews on here, but when I do, I add the video component so that those of you on the YouTube channel can watch the video component, and when Michael reached out, I just started doing some research into what he was about and what he was doing, and watched a few speeches that Michael gave, and was definitely saw that there were a lot of common themes. So instead of me just reading a bio, I wanted Michael to just kind of share a little bit about what he's done and what he does and why he's done it. So Michael, thanks so much for being on, and let us know a little bit about who you are and why you're here.
All right, sounds good, Ashley. So I want to start with a story that'll set the table for us to talk about who I am and where I come from. And it's about a farmer and a donkey, all right? And this donkey is one of his favorite farm animals because once he finishes working with the donkey on the farm, he brings the donkey back to his home and he allows the donkey to play with his kids. So, imagine he comes down the driveway, the kids come running out the house, they come out, they wash, they ride, they play with the donkey, and this is like a normal ritual that they do, he does with the donkey on a regular basis. So, the donkey is more like a work animal, but also a pet. One day he brings him home, comes down the driveway, they do their thing. He releases them out to the farm. They go inside to eat and go to bed. The following morning, the farmer comes out, he whistles for his donkey, and the donkey doesn't show up. So when the donkey doesn't show up, the farmer wants to, of course, find him. So he starts walking around the farm, and he's calling his name, and he finally hears him making noise at the bottom of an empty water well. Now, during the night while the donkey was wandering, he stumbled and fell into a water well, and obviously he couldn't get out, so all night he was making a noise. The farmer sees that he's down there, he walks over. Of course, he wants to get him out, so he goes and gets 6 of his friends. He brings 6 of his friends over to the well. They look in the well, they're like, how are we going to get him out? One of his friends suggested that they get some rope. So all 6 of them got some rope, and they decided they were going to lasso him and pull him out. So they throw the rope, they miss. They throw the rope, they miss. They throw the rope, they miss. Then finally, they throw it by his hind legs. He steps into the rope, they shimmy it up his body, and they start to pull. They pull, the donkey moves. They pull, the donkey moves. They pull, the donkey moves. Then halfway up the well, Ashley, they realize that the donkey's too heavy. So they stop pulling, they lower him back to the bottom of the well, and now the farmer has to make a grim decision. Now, see, he can't feed the donkey food at the bottom of the well because that wouldn't make any sense. He can't starve him because, like I said, he's more like a pet. So he's like, I really can't starve him, And then one of his hot-headed friends was like, hey, just shoot him. He's like, no, I can't shoot him. So one of his more reasonable friends came up and whispered in his ear. And he said, listen, you don't want your kids to fall into the well. So what we're going to do is we're going to sacrifice your donkey so that your kids are protected from falling in the well. We're going to cover him with dirt. And so the farmer said, you know what? I think I could deal with that. So all 6 of them get shovels and they start shoveling dirt. And every time that dirt would hit the donkey would scream, and it would cause the farmer some distress. So you got dirt, scream, dirt, scream, dirt, scream. And then all of a sudden the scream stopped. When the scream stopped, they gave the donkey a moment of silence, but they kept going to work. More dirt, more dirt, more dirt. The next thing you know, Ashley, you see his right ear. So they start shoveling faster, more dirt, more dirt. The next thing you know, you see half his body. They keep shoveling faster, more dirt, more dirt. The next thing you know, this donkey walks right out of the well that he fell into. Now, I see you smiling, so you kind of figured this out, but I'm going to let you know what happened. Every time that dirt came across the wall, it would fall on the donkey's back. He would shake it off, and he would step on it. And he took every scoop of dirt that was meant to kill him to save his life. Now, I tell you that, Ashley, when you ask who I am, it's because I am the donkey. And what I want to do is I want to share with you some of my dirt. I grew up in a home with a raging alcoholic father. And he raged from the time I was born until the time he died when I was 16. And I'm talking about living in an environment like that was so crazy because during the day, no matter what went on and I got caught up in happiness, something would always tap me on the shoulder and remind me that, hey, listen, buddy, don't get too happy because you got to go home to that craziness in your house. On top of living in with a raging alcoholic father, I grew up in poverty. Now, both my parents worked full time. My dad was a bus driver. My mom was a housekeeper. All right. But my dad's money went to drinking. And my mother actually raised 4 kids with a housekeeping salary. So we didn't really have much money as we grew up. You know what I'm saying? And then if you're, the head of your household's an alcoholic, as far as dysfunction, I mean, it's just layered over layered over layered. And then in my community, unfortunately, the homes were similar to mine. And so you just had this chaos and this craziness going on. And it was how I was brought up. But the silver lining to the story is this. I was able to go through all of that, Ashley. And I now use everything that I went through to motivate and move other people to a place of peace and a place of resilience and overcoming, and I've been able to take that. I've created a nonprofit organization that I work with youth in schools. I speak from a podium and I motivate others. And I wrote a book. So, that's a little bit of the things that, who I am. That's it. You know what I'm saying?
What's the name of your book?
Be encouraged.
Be encouraged. Wow, I mean, what a great story and a great analogy for emotional resilience, for being able to shake it off and bounce off. And I know that's been a common theme. I know that, especially for knowing that we have a lot of parents listening, okay, that going in and speaking to youth, that was really intriguing to me. And I wanted to hear a little bit about what that looks like, especially me being an unschooling mom traveling all over the country. I don't have as much experience of my kids being sitting in a traditional school setting. So, what exactly do you do with dealing with maybe a kid just like you? How are you going into the schools and doing anything there?
So what I do is, and it's funny with what's going on in society with racial barriers and the different disconnects. I've been doing the groundwork for this way before it started to be known. I say that to you because if you are a principal or if you were a principal, Ashley, I would come to you, meet with you. And what I would ask for is a cross section, 20 students, because I do my program 2 full days in a school, but I want the 20 students to be made up of every type of student you have in your building. So I want white, Black, Latino, academic, athlete, and I want that to be my group of 20. All right. I bring them into a room. I do everything in a circle. And what I do is I take them through a 2-day experiential experience. But what I do is the activities are based on giving them the ability to not only gain insight on themselves, but also get to build community with these students that they don't normally hang out with. Now, the donkey story, believe it or not, is how I open all my workshops. Now, I do that, and then I show the young people pictures. So I actually have a picture of the home that I grew up in. And what's crazy about it is if you look at the picture looks like the house is condemned, but it's exactly the way it was when I lived in it. And what I do is I show them the picture of where I grew up, explain to them how it felt to live in that house, and then I show them a picture of where I live at now. And I say that to you because it sets the table, because as we go through the experiential experience, I've explained to them that their leader, the facilitator that's leading them, has cracked, he's a crackpot, he has cracks, so that they are open to do the same as they share. Now, just to let you know, in the activities, I'm a firm believer that we go through life, we step on landmines, They blow us, they explode, but they don't blow us up, but they cause damage. And what we tend to do is we start to make decisions based on the damage rather than what's going on in real time. So when you ask me, what do I do when I get a young person in my room, is I have them retrace their steps and find the landmines and ask themselves, am I making decisions today based on what happened to me when I was 7? Or am I making decisions based on what's happening in reality?
Gotcha. And what happens? I'm curious because I've seen some of these videos and I've seen the aha moment on a child's face in some of these videos where just that I've seen even that you've shared that show that realization of, oh, okay, this is personal now, this applies to me and I get it. For somebody who may be dealing with a kiddo that is checked out, maybe completely lost in video games or has a one track mind, only cares about one thing or nothing. I know, especially in this past year with all of the volatility, there's a lot of opportunity for checking out. And especially for younger kids, with so much emotional volatility that we see all over the place, it can be hard to not just have them shut down. So, I mean, what kind of encouragement could you give for parents on how to maybe open that door for them to even care about wanting their life to be better or to change anything, make it positive? Because obviously, if they don't have the care, it's hard. How can we open the door if we've got a kid that's checked out?
So what I want to do is I'm going to address that. Let's rewind a little bit.
All
The
right.
way that the way that you can get ahead of one of your young people, because I do the same with my kids, to check out is I've made it part of my mission to watch my children so closely that when they start to check out, I address it. You
Mhm.
see what I'm saying? So my kids, my personal children, don't get to a point when they start to do irregularities and I pick up on it, boom, I'm on it. If my daughter's in her room and she's in there too often and too long, I don't go an extra week or so. I'm on it. And what happens is when you get on it and you're proactive, the hole doesn't get as deep and they will appreciate it because a child, I mean, I remember when I was a teenager, I used to hate rules, but I wanted them because I knew I was out of control. So I needed you every so often to slap me on the wrist and tell me, sit down and go do what you have to do. Because if not, then it would make me feel out of control. And so to get in front of it, you always make sure that you are checking in and staying, I call it, in tempo with your kid, so that once they step off tempo, you can address it. But if it goes too long, what you do is you have to step back and find some familiarity with it, because what a young person, what I think young people feed off of in my group is that I listen in between the lines. And what I mean by that is when they speak, I absorb everything. So sometimes they won't even tell me their story, and I will blow their mind because as they leave the crumbs, I pick up the crumbs, and then all of a sudden I lay out to them this story, and they look at me like, how do you know all that? Not even knowing that they fed me all the information. So sometimes with a parent, step back, look at the broad picture, and just find little spaces of commonality where you can get in there and let your child know, listen, I love you, I care about you, I don't want to control your life, but we have to find a common place because this is something that'll make us have a healthy relationship.
Oh, I love that. And such a proactive approach, which we talk about so much, is, before they check out, check in. I love that. And also reading between the lines, recognizing that the words that they say is only a small part of the whole story. And and that goes. I have a degree in sign language interpreting. My children always get on my case for me, always using my hands when I talk. And I've told them about that same thing, that the beauty in learning the sign language is, this actual sign is simply the word, but the movement is the song. I mean, the facial expression, it's the way that, I mean, of course, when we're speaking, it's our tone of voice, it's our facial expressions, it's our body language, it's the silence in between what we say. I mean, there's so many things that can tell us so much about where someone is at. So, okay, so before checkout, check in and look
Yes.
at the big picture. What if it's too late? What if now all of a sudden you're remembering to check in, but they've already checked out? What are some opportunities to help to steer them back?
Is to steer them back is you have to kind of see some of the loves they may have had before checking out. Um, and really, you know, wow, it's funny how there's, timing. My daughter, I mean, I won't get into the specifics because she'll kill me. Yeah, no, just recently kind of went through she's 16, a little teenage thing. And, she was struggling. She wouldn't tell us really what it was. And, I just shot her text message and I said, listen, I promised myself that, I wouldn't be out here saving the kids of the world and having my kids struggle. I just wanted her to know that. And yes, so the text message was enough to let her know and understand that we could go there. So when you say that you feel that they're so far gone, I think even though they may get annoyed of you continuing to pressing, what you have some parents do it, and I'm just keeping it real, with anxiety, when anxiety came out, with the medication. Let's not get into if they should take it or if they should not take it, but I'm going for a parent that now sees that their child has an issue, but they're not into putting in the work to help that child. They're just throwing more medication. Let them take a pill, sit in the back room, and deal with it. So I want to connect that to no, not going that route, but going to a place to let your child know that whatever we need to do together, I'm in your corner. I'm in your corner. And I think when a person genuinely feels that, even if they don't speak, it's like if I'm going through a supermarket, right, and I see a stranger, and I feel vibes, and you just see their face, and you're like, wow, that person just looks like they're really having a bad one, and I miss it, so I pass them, and I wanted to say something, but I didn't get it. I'll keep going around the supermarket till I see him again, and I just say, hey, you know what? It looks like your heart is heavy. You got a heavy heart. And they just look at you and you keep moving. And sometimes just the acknowledgement of the fact that they may not be in a proper place at the time brings some relief.
Validation is so important, and sometimes we discount that for our kids. I know that is something that I'm very grateful for my parents for, is that they validated my feelings. And just like that story of you just saying, just referencing that your daughter was going through some teen stuff, you know when I was going through my teen stuff and I was going through my heartbreak of my first broken, my first love lost, my first heartbreak. I mean, my mother held my hand and walked me through that, recognizing that in my mind at that point, in my young teenage mind, this was as substantial as a divorce. Obviously, it's different, but the validation that she gave me, that she let me grieve this loss, and recognizing that that was as much as I knew of love, and this was just as devastating to me as what my mind could comprehend. That a broken relationship at an older age. So yeah, validation is so important, and I love that that reminder that even if we feel like our kids have checked out, even if we feel like things are lost, I mean, that first step is simply, I mean, it's like you said, finding the tempo. I mean, it's getting back to the relationship. So beyond the interest or anything, do you have that relationship and have you built it? And sometimes it can be something super small. It can be sending a little text that was just enough to give that support. Um, Yeah, my dad sending me giving me a card when Valentine's, when I had some jerky boyfriend that wouldn't was giving me the silent treatment, and I get the
Right.
card from my dad that says boyfriends come and boyfriends go, but I'll always be your daddy-o. And I held on to that, and that got me through a lot. I didn't care so much about that situation. I let that go because those little reminders from my parents that gave me the encouragement and the validation and the support. So I love that. Okay, so you also I wanted to have you share if just in everything you do with talking, it's so much about that growth mindset and being proactive with our kids. So, what are some top tips that you can give to that you would recommend for parents to kind of keep up that good relationship with your children and help to get them to that point of independence?
You know, finding different topics to explore with them. You know, one thing that I push in my workshops is that we are products of our thought lives. You know what I mean? And so what young people need to understand is that you know, you have the power to kick out negative thoughts rather than holding on to them. You hold on to them, they germinate, they plant themselves, they grow, and then they become part of your thought process. You know, I have a tag that be the driver of your car, not the passenger of your car. And I use that. And what I mean by that is that we have to be able to take our life experiences and some of the negative things that are told to us, and make sure that we are on top of them. Because if we're not careful, those things become the catalyst and the push of the direction that we go on. So I think that having dialogue with our children about things that are relevant into their world, um, not only helps to keep the communication line open, but then you also don't become, you know, a lame parent. You know, I keep up with their music. You know what I'm saying? We have crossovers, so you know when we're in the car, it's not like if they put on a station or some music that they're listening to. You know, they love it. That dad. I mean, I'll put it on first. You know what I mean? And so just keeping it. We don't have to. What I don't like to see is we're not our children's friends. You know, we're not friends. I don't want to create a relationship where you think I'm your friend, because then once I have to discipline you, you feel I disrespected you. And if you create that type of a relationship, then you're in for some trouble. But a relationship where they know you care, you're empathetic, but when you have to lower the hammer, you have to lower the hammer and do what you have to do. So, you know, just allowing them to understand that, you know, I like to stay familiar with my kids and keep the dialogue in the space open for communication.
And just in what you're saying too, I mean that not being friends to our kids is not saying that we're not being friendly to our children.
Right.
And be very friendly to our children, and also I think that that big aspect is respect, is mutual
Yeah.
respect. And
Yeah.
yeah, as a parent, I'm going to have to make the executive decisions for the family. But that being said, I will respect your needs and hear you out in the process, and then I can give that final say. And I think that, and I use that a lot. I say bathtub boundaries with an ocean of love. You know, you throw a kid in the middle of a bathtub, and they can play to their heart's content and be happy playing in the bubbles and everything else. You throw that same baby into the middle of the ocean, and there's pure terror. There's no walls, there's no boundary, there's nothing. You don't know how far you're going to go. And so when you can create a clear boundary that is not being the enemy, and I think that's sometimes when we say don't be friends to our kids, it's like, well, that means we must be enemies to our children or authoritarian to our children. And no, we can be very empathetic, we can be very respectful, and we can be very clear on boundaries as a way to help them to actually support their independence, love them more, give them more encouragement, because they do know where that line is. So they're not left in the unknown of how far do I go, what can I do, what can I not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree 100%.
Love that. Is there any, just knowing all of the exercises, the fun things that you're doing in the community? If there is, let's say we are in situations where it's a homeschooling family, unschooling family, we are, stay home orders, the different reasons why we have people that are not going out and not doing a group thing right now for our little families. Are there any kind of ideas that you have for maybe an exercise to help foster independence or a growth mindset or even team building as a family that we could do together to maybe help reinforce those relationships at home?
I have a bunch of activities that you could do on an individual level. Um, you know, a great activity that I have the young people do to get well, not young people but adults as well, to get
What
to know.
run these? Do you have like a, this is for middle school and up to adults, or are these pretty
No, broad, broad. You know what? I If I did an adult workshop or a high school workshop, my material is exactly the same. Actually, my manual doesn't change. It's the same material. Your manual is just your life story,
broad?
so I don't have to change the material depending on the age of the person that I'm dealing with. But we do an activity we call "Who Am I," which is a nice one to get a gauge of where you are at a certain time. And what you do is you write down 10 words that describe who you are, both positive and negative, and then you prioritize them. You put them in order of how important they are to you. And then what I do is I read through a script and I have them connect the word to their lives, how it affects their relationships and so forth. I have them crumble up the word after each one is completed. And by the end, there's 10 papers in front of them crumbled up. And then they have to pick up at the end the words that they want to keep and then leave on the floor as the ones that they want to leave behind. And it's interesting. It's interesting because you'll see what people leave on their floors, what people decide to pick up. But it is a great activity to gauge or get some foundation or some traction on the type of person that you want to create and become, especially during COVID, because I feel like this is a time of self-reflection. I just put out a video on my social media yesterday, and I say that because what my mom had her 88th birthday. And when I knew she was 88, but she's my mom, so you don't really think of the number. So when I called to wish her happy birthday, I'm like, wait a second, 88 years. And so then I did the math, Ashley. I was like, all right, she's 88, I'm 53. And I'm thinking about how many years left if I live to be 88 that I have to live. Now, I say that to you because when we think about time, COVID, when we look back on it, once it goes, it's going to be a short period of time compared to our entire lives. So we got to hold it down, stick in there, because there's going to be a time where we're at a barbecue and we're going to be laughing, drinking punch and saying, do you remember in 2020 when we couldn't leave our house and we had to wear a mask? And we'll be like, it was a short period of time, and you don't want this short period of time to take you out.
Mhm. Gotcha. Yeah, we can definitely. This is yet one more opportunity for growth or for being a victim of circumstance. And I
Yeah.
talk a lot on the podcast about not being a victim of circumstance. Life is going to happen, regardless of whether or not you want it to. Change is going to happen, regardless of whether or not you want it. You are excited about it or want it. Um, but what we do with that can be all of the difference. And yeah, I love your even uh, you were talking earlier about about what you say and what you believe and everything. And my husband was actually just saying today, um, the quote we often use in our household is Earl Nightingale: "You become what you think about." The Strangest Secret, and that was a book by Earl Nightingale that really impacted my father at 13 years and started what it was the catalyst to build his whole business with 48 Days. And that quote of "you become what you think about" has been something that we have used constantly with our children, and just on when we start to kind of get into this negativity, this woe is me, or things that don't go our way. Which ones are we focusing on? Which side are we focusing on?
Yep,
So,
yep.
what are some, and since you've got the positive affirmations and everything anyway, why don't we kind of wrap it up also with just some what are a few affirmations that are great affirmations that maybe a family might want to that they could use to kind of help to foster this positivity in their home.
I do a great activity, which you could do it at the dinner table. Is to take 1 minute and list all the positive qualities about yourself. You know what I'm saying? And I do it sometimes with partners, so that at the end, so I'll have like 20 students, so 10 on 10 students across from each other. But once you list the positive things, I have somebody else say them to you. And it's amazing. Yeah, it is. It is to watch a young person list them and then have somebody. So I'll say, all right, stand up and introduce to us the person you spoke to. And to hear their partner say these positive things about them, um, it was great coming out their mouths, but it was twice as good, listening to somebody else say, or some that can't accept it and they put their heads down. But again, again, just reiterating, like you're saying, being products of our thought lives, just keeping it in the realm of positivity. So, that's something as far as affirmation, and never any opportunity you get to highlight something going on that's positive. If my kids or anyone in the family does something positive, we're quick to make sure that we highlight it so that it doesn't go unnoticed.
And it's easy to fall into the negativity spiral of criticism, where all you're doing is criticizing the clothes on the floor and the messy counter and they haven't showered in days. All of the criticisms that we can get, and not take those moments to point out when they're doing something right.
Yeah,
Oftentimes, especially when we're busy and distracted, we don't notice it until it bothers us or rubs us the wrong way. And then all of a sudden we're noticing, and we're not noticing the 3 hours that they were silent and awesome and doing their own thing before. So, yeah, definitely having those elements of it. And I with your exercises that you've done too, I think that the physical action. So, like that first exercise you were sharing about, that physical action of taking the balls and wadding them up and throwing them on the floor. Are you there?
yeah, yeah. I'm listening.
Okay, good deal. Sorry, I thought you were frozen for a second, so I wanted to make sure. All right, I'll cut
No.
that part. Taking them and throwing them on the floor, and then just that the physical activity of doing that and opening it up. You could have just theorized, but that's a different. And then having the conversation where you're telling the compliments to somebody else and letting that person say it, and hearing that other person talking about one another. These are the exercises that, you coming in as a speaker and doing these activities and these exercises can be huge game changers. And so much of it, I think, has to do with that. You've gotten intentional and you created something that really gets their focus into it. And is way more of a kind of, if you think about the auditory, visual, kinesthetic type of learners, you're hitting all of it. You're having them jump into the process. And so, if we're looking for resets in our family, we're looking for opportunities to instill a growth mindset, to do different things like this. Sometimes maybe we stop talking about it and maybe do something, do an activity, do an action, or something like this that may jar something different. I mean, I definitely want to do the having my kids write down qualities and throwing them down on the ground and picking up intentionally what they want. And I want to give them opportunities to share what's great about each of them and voice it to each other. And I'm going to do both of those with my family, just because it's different than just sitting down and having a mommy lecture or a conversation about how we all should feel better. No, doing something really helps to implement that mindset and that approach with our kids, for sure.
Yes, I agree.
All right. All right. So, any last words of wisdom, advice that you would give for families? I know that there are some that they're the parents carrying wounds of their past, and they have rocky history, they have rocky stories, they have a story like you maybe, and maybe not with the same level of resilience of being able to get out of it. We have pains and wounds from our parents, but we also and we have pains and wounds with our kids, and just disconnect with our kids, frustration with our extended family. What could be your final word of advice for how to stay focused on the positive?
What you want to do is you want to break cycles. And that's what I did. And what I mean by that is, in the house that I show my students and the people that participate in my workshops, I rarely had heat in the wintertime. And I remember falling asleep about 10 years old. And I promised myself that if I had, or when I have my only children, they would never have to grow up in the environment that I grew up in. I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they didn't graduate to the life that I have now. They only know the life that we have now. And so make it their duty to not pass on some of that dysfunction that came from when they were growing up, or what they come from. So making a conscious effort to not pass on, I always talk about how poverty is a mentality. And so you could pass on a mentality of poverty to your kids, and it has nothing to do with not having money. And so we have to be able to pass on things to our kids that are healthy, and not some of these unhealthy habits that we bring from those situations that we had to be resilient and overcome. So sometimes you have to be able to be big enough to not only do it for yourself, but you have to do it for those that are coming behind you.
Yes, I love that. Yes, and we always have that opportunity to create that clean slate and start fresh from right now. Not where did I come from, but where do I want to go? Who do I want to be in that process? And we have the beautiful opportunity to create that every day.
Yes, we do.
All right. Well, so where is the best way that people can reach you and find out more about you?
All right. So for my nonprofit working with the students, they can come to youthvoicescenter.org. For my public speaking platform, come visit me at michaelarterberry.com. See some of my things that I do there. They can follow me on my social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. On Facebook, I have a group called Be Encouraged, so that they can come and join the group. And I like to be interactive on my social media pages. And my goal is just to inspire and bring light to some of the darkness that may be going on in society today. So those are some of the places. And then my book, Be Encouraged. To get a copy, the book is about it's written devotional style. So grab a page, read a page. After hearing me speak, it may speak to you a little differently because you know my story. But each page is just to give you the strength and the insight of being resilient. Just being able to fly above the storm, rather than getting caught up in the storm.
Mm, I love it. I will be ordering a copy of your book myself and going through it. So I so appreciate the time that you've taken and being on here, sharing the story, and being another voice of positivity for so many people. We need so much of this, and the more that we can do this and recognize not just finding the positivity and having a positive outlook, but recognizing our own self worth and our own relevance and importance and significance, and being able to kind of stand up in our own confidence and then be able to connect with others can truly show us how the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Namaste.
Yes, 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 yeah. Namaste. I love that. Yes.
One, two, three. Up with the rising sun, already on the run. Mama says. tangled mess, and you don't have to stress. Mama says, Mama, stay. 'Cause today I will stand up and